All right, call meeting back to order. This is the Tillamook County Budget Committee, and it's Tuesday, April 11, 2023. We are back in session following a published agenda. Next up would be the museum, and I understand we've got a new individual who would, new director. Can someone introduce this person, and then we'll go from there. And I presume it's online now, right?
Yes. Yes, so I would be happy to introduce our new director. Peyton Tracy is our new director. Peyton came on with us as our exhibits manager, and I think she did that job for about a year prior to stepping into an interim director position, which she also did for approximately, I think, a year, and we promoted her to full-time director. I think that's been, 3 or 4 months ago, so Bill might have the tighter timeline. But Peyton comes to us with a very strong background in museum science, which has been really fun. And has done a great job of stepping in as our director. So Peyton, welcome. We're delighted to have you with us today.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here, and I'm sorry for my tardiness.
Sometimes as an executive director, things happen. Been there, done that.
All right, well, thank you. So we have your material that you submitted to the county treasurer, and I think we've all had an opportunity to look at that. So I'll ask you, do you have something prepared that you would like to tell us or show us, or both, or you and the county treasurer together, or how would you like to proceed?
I don't have any like PowerPoints or anything like that prepared for you guys today, but I'm happy to just sort of talk about where we're at, how this compares to previous years, what our plans are for this upcoming year, and how this fits into that. Whatever works. I'm sorry I'm a little new to this process, so.
That sounds great to me, Peyton.
Yeah.
It is her first year, and I don't think we told her what we expected.
Okay. Well, we're all 6 of us have been around this now for some time, and we're pretty familiar with the museum, and we're familiar with the relationship some years way back, that it was more of the county, part of the county than it is even today. And we know there's been a transfer of monies to assist with the operation and maintenance over the years. So we're pretty familiar with that. So let me ask the treasurer then, who I think helped prepare this budget, are there any things that we should know specific or different from prior years? And maybe you could give a quick summary from the treasurer's perspective.
To my knowledge, there are no changes. There was no change to the request from last year. And the only thing that had changed is, yes, they have a new director.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
First of all, I probably got to declare kind of a conflict of interest because I'm also on the museum board, so I will be voting on something, a potential conflict of interest. I have to say that Peyton's got some great plans moving forward for the museum. And we're transitioning into more of a museum and community center as we move forward. And part of the reason Peyton doesn't have a display or a whatever was my fault. I said the committee really just needs to know where we're headed and what we're spending the money on. And I'm excited to be on the museum board again. It is going in the positive direction. I can't tell you how much Peyton has brought forward for our new board and for the board. So that's just me kind of spinning it. I do think Peyton has done a fantastic job, and the reason there's not a presentation was because I said all we have to do is talk about the money.
All right, so let's talk about the money then. The subsidy request is, let's see, how much is it here?
$250,000.
$250,000, I was going to say $250,000. That's right.
Yeah, and this is, as a reminder, is one of the allocations that the commissioners brought forward to suggest that this be an annual allocation to the Pioneer Museum so that they would have the stability going forward to know what to plan for. So the amount that Peyton has put in there for county support is the amount that the county has provided for her as the intended support.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
So Peyton, this is Commissioner Dave Yamamoto. Welcome. The Kilchis Point Reserve, I mean, that's one of my favorite parts of what you do. Can you talk a little bit about how you're I mean, I know you inherited that, but I think it's a real jewel for Tillamook County. Can you talk a little bit about how you're handling Kilch's Point?
Absolutely. So we've been developing, well, on several fronts. So first of all, we've been developing a much more direct care plan, sort of in conjunction with Bay City, in being able to assist us with some of the sort of daily care activities, in terms of allowing for the permitting that enables our full-time caretakers to live out there, and to take care of the property and do all of the things that they need to do to make sure that the trails are safe and maintained, make sure that the bathrooms are clean, that everything makes sense, and any kind of vandalism that might be happening on the property gets handled quickly and immediately. And I cannot speak highly enough of them. They have done they've conducted nothing short of miracles out there. So having that kind of stability out there is also deeply appreciated. Some of the things that we requested, funding for in our budget request is for educational programming, exhibit programming, that sort of thing, which in part we want to do at Kilch's Point Reserve, because for a long time there hasn't been as much attention out there, just because some of the big momentum was attached to staff members that are no longer associated with the museum, but it's such a tremendous asset to our community, and we wanted to ensure that things stay fresh and new out there. So updating our interpretation, bringing programming back to Kilch's Point Reserve is something that we would really love to do, whether that be guided tours, whether that be like online programming that can be printed off by anybody and taken out there, so that they can walk around and get to know things. So those are some of the, like, just a few of the things off the top of my head that we're interested in doing. We're also working on expanding and building relationships with different organizations across the state and locally who both have historic ties to the area, whether that be different tribal groups, who the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde and the Confederate Tribes of the Siletz, who have history on that land, and other, like the Historical Society has been working with Vince Bogart and the logging company that we want to put some interpretation out there as well. That's how that specific chunk of land was used in the past. So that's just a smattering of the things that I've thought about for KPR, just in stability, as well as just like really highlighting that this is a really key historic space in our community.
Thank you, Peyton.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments?
I wonder, Peyton, if you'd mind just talking briefly about sort of state of the museum, like, you know, what are some of your new initiatives, or what are your big goals for this year?
Sure. The museum that I sort of stepped into in terms of directing is still just absolutely full to bursting with potential, and in some ways it feels even more so. We were able to expand our staff last fall to include a new exhibit developer named Jenny Teese, who was finally able to get housing in our community in January. And she is full to bursting with all of these phenomenal ideas that are things that I think have always been here, but she and I both have been able to sort of spy these opportunities to be more inclusive in terms of who we attract into our museum from both our local community and our tourist community, and making it more amenable. If you guys have been in the museum, you know that it's not the most ADA accessible building, because it's a 1905 courthouse. It just sort of is what it is. But so she's been working on a lot of very exciting exhibit programs, updating our exhibits to make them more youth-friendly, as well as just a greater degree of interpretation. And so that's something that we're really prioritizing moving forward this year. Sorry, did I?
Nope.
No, you're fine. We have someone who needs to mute. There we go. Go ahead,
Oh, there
keep
we
going.
go. Sorry. And it's, so yeah, lots of new exhibits coming down the pipe. We're in a really stable moment right now for the museum, which we feel very fortunate to be in terms of We've got a lot of good systems in place. We've got a lot of sort of systems figured out from the tumult that we have felt over the last 3 years, in particular with pandemic. That is enabling us to like think bigger and think like, how can we improve this museum? Some of the things that we've been doing that I think are setting us up for success is we just completed the first phase of a board visioning workshop that has laid out a lot of priorities for the museum of what we want to make sure we're bringing forward and what we're prioritizing in terms of meeting our community and meeting our mission more successfully. So yeah, exhibit program, the board visioning workshop. Updating our facilities is another priority for us moving forward, just to ensure that everybody is safe and happy and everything works as intended. Overall, it's just, I don't know, it feels really exciting time to be at the museum right now because I just think there's so much potential. Something that's booked into the budget is also bringing in my replacements. I was the collections manager when I was brought in as staff. So continuing the collections inventory that we started last year, which will open up accessibility to the artifacts in our museum, which will be phenomenal for community researchers. It'll be great for staff and volunteers. It'll be something that we can put online so that we get more people interested in the things that we have in our building and beyond, so that we can better preserve Tillamook's history, better tell our story, and find people who can help us expand on telling that story, because there's lots of wonderful experts around here that I may not know about, and they may not know exactly what we have either. So putting ourselves out there, bringing people in and sharing our story, that's really sort of the triumvirate thoughts of things I'm trying to do right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman. So Peyton, it's interesting, I didn't know you were formerly the collections manager. And it's my understanding that the number of items that you have in your collection is huge. Do you have plans for that in the future, or is there a way the county can help you with that collection that you have?
Absolutely. So we are full to bursting. If any of you are ever curious to see our attic storage, I'd be happy to give you a tour. But yes, I was brought in as the collections manager in part to get a handle on what we have, because we've had a lot of given my museum background, given I worked in a collections-based museum consultancy before I came here, the collections records we have are absolutely phenomenal. Like, it's really shocking. But storage is tight. And we are absolutely full, and we have 2 offsite storage facilities, one at Kilch's Point and the other at Latimer Quilton Textile Center, but Latimer Quilton Textile Center now owns that building. They were leasing it from us. And they would like us out, which means we're over full. I know that we are, there have been discussions about an annex stored, like a high quality, environmentally controlled storage facility would be absolutely game changing for this museum in terms of being able to preserve this community's past, present, and future. And ensuring that it will get the high quality of care that it needs and deserves. Because right now, the storage that we provide it's sufficient, but it's the difference between will this object be here in 100 years versus will this object be here in 300 years. So that's the difference that having environmentally controlled facility that I don't believe is possible in our building as it currently stands. Would be what that would be able to provide. I think such a facility also would be beneficial, not just for us, but for any of the institutions in Tillamook County as well, because this is an issue that, as I talk to the groups in the Tillamook County History Alliance, our other collaborators at other local institutions and museums where they're worried about being in flood zones or they're worried about being in the tsunami zones, that, in the event of an emergency, what kind of history might end up being lost. And so that's something that I've been chewing over for a while that I think would be, game changing is the only word I could come to.
Thank you, Peyton. You took that in exactly the direction I was hoping you would take that.
Could you speak to how our museum might compare with your colleagues elsewhere in Morgan or Washington or places that you know? In other words, recovering after the pandemic and what has happened, are we better, worse, or better or worse or the same? Or what's your view on how things have been going over the past few years?
Sure. I think that we were one of the very lucky. They're in just one of the AAM, the American Alliance of Museums, is one of the largest museum-based professional organizations in the country. And the last number that I heard is in the first year of the pandemic alone, something like 3,000 museums closed because they just were not able to sustain themselves. And most of them were small little community museums, not unlike ourselves. And so I think we are immensely fortunate. And it has been wonderful, the community support that came out to ensure that we would be stable, we would be all right. And so we were also one of the lucky few that the pandemic was kind to us because we had such community support that like people flooded out with donations, because we had several staff turnovers prior to the event. We were able to save some money in the pandemic as well. And so it ended up putting us into a comfy location, which is not unusual in the museum community. And I think, again, set us up for, and put us in a phenomenal position to be able to launch into all of the potential that I see in this museum, that my predecessor saw in this museum, that the board sees, to really become a history hub, if you will, for Tillamook County. I think that everyone who's ever been involved in this museum absolutely sees the potential that's in this museum, just the absolute heart and soul that has been poured into this building by the community. Something that the longer I am here in either of the positions that I see is that the artifacts that are here, the stories that have been preserved here are, it's really powerful and it's really special to know how intensely this museum has been, or the trust that has been placed in this institution by this community to be a repository for everything that it is, good, bad, and otherwise. So it's something that I would love to get this museum to a point where it can be accessible to everybody so that they know what kind of treasures are here. And I think that all museums are kind of like that, but in all of the years that I have been in the museum field and all of the museums that I have worked with, many museums, one of the very common struggles that they have is trying to convince the community why their history matters. And that is never, not for a single moment has that ever been an issue for me here. And it's something that I'm, as a museum professional from outside of Tillamook coming into this community, is something that I find really special and I don't take it for granted. So just being able to really put it out there and continue to demonstrate to folks why we should continue to be a trusted repository for this history is what matters to me, because clearly they have shown their faith in us.
Thank you. Well, I didn't realize 3,000 museums have closed, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, it was a pretty heartbreaking number to read. Many of them were just small historic house museums that were the closest thing to a historical society many tiny little towns had. But many of them, if it makes you feel better, they closed, but they would combine with other historic organizations so that the history would go on being preserved even if it wasn't in their brick and mortar location. But even so, it's still, the first year of the pandemic was a brutal one in the museum community.
Yeah, that's a terrible loss.
Well, you know what they say, if you forget your past, you're gonna make the same mistakes again, or something like that, and so. Yeah. So what other questions do any of us have regarding the museum?
I don't have a question, but just for anybody who's listening out there who is not familiar with the funding that we did decide that we would provide in a regular way for the museum, it's really intended to fund their very base expenses to ensure that the museum would survive. So it is not intended to fund everything they will do, but it is intended to make sure that they have the very basic staff and occupancy that they need to keep the museum going. And that comes from TLT, which is not part of our general fund. And for those who want to go way back, there was originally a taxing structure that supported the museum, and in the 80s, I believe, when our tax rates were all pulled together and that direct tax allocation to the museum was brought into our general tax allocation. So this community had made a commitment to this museum long ago that said we want it to be here, we would be willing to be taxed for it. We are fortunate today to have TLT that we are able to use to fulfill the commitment to our community that they made initially. So I think it's important, since this is a budget hearing, that we do talk about what the revenue source is, why this is a commitment that the county has, and why the current budget committee is putting this money forward to the museum.
Mr. Chairman, and looking back at that original levy, if it was still in place now, it would be raising somewhere in the neighborhood of $340,000 for the museum. So it's kind of almost, I look at it as kind of an ethical responsibility for the county to continue on with that, because the voters did approve it, and by golly, the voters did approve ballot measure 50 or whichever one it was that took it away, but they did it within 9 months, which did not make sense.
So thank you, just wanted to get that on the record for anyone who might go back and listen to these hearings and wonder why the Pioneer Museum has been chosen.
Well, thank you, that's good to put on the record, and you're right, I think there are a lot of people who don't know that history, and as Mr. Bardline just pointed out, if that had remained in place, it'd be a little bit more than what's being offered up today. So, yeah, I think, and I would agree, there's certainly a moral obligation going back to value what the taxpayers did some years back. So, anything else on the museum? All right, thank you very much. Nice to meet you, even though we didn't actually meet you in person, but I'm sure there'll come a time when we can. Next up.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Peyton.
Thanks, Peyton.
Thanks, Peyton.
Thank you all.
Mhm. Next up is the fair. Is Cammie coming over? Are we doing that?
She's virtual. She's online.
She's online, okay. I think most of us are somewhat familiar with the fair, or quite familiar with the fair and what it does, and I can't think of something that's a more integral part of Tillamook County and has put Tillamook County on the map than the county fair. It simply is the event of the season, and I was coming to this fair long before I moved here, and I, having gone to fairs, I think I mentioned one time I was, my wife and I were county fair junkies. We've been to most every fair from Seattle to Medford and down to Sacramento, and we used to do 3 fairs a week in the earlier days, and I can tell you without exception, there is none better than the Tillamook County Fair. It simply is not. Even though it's relatively short compared to the state fairs and others that run for 7 to 10 days, but my goodness, what happens here in our little community is quite remarkable. So with that, Cammie, go ahead and tell us about your current request and what we should know, and then we'll offer up some questions.
Well, good morning, and I apologize, I can't be there in person. Obviously, this is not my normal voice, but way better than it was yesterday. So we have a lot of exciting things going on at the fair, and I'm really excited to hear what Peyton was talking about, because I feel some collaboration coming between the museum and the fairground. So, and I will say, she did also, in her former capacity, when they did the museum, did the whole spread, as you would say, on the fairgrounds. She came out, gathered up all of our information. She preserved it all when she returned it, and talked about how we could, continue to preserve what we have. Same situation. Ours all goes into what we call the ghost hole. It goes into a closet, never to be seen again until the state archivist comes out and checks our records. So we too have an appreciation for preserving what we have going on there. So I will start off by saying we do not have our entertainment lined out for this year. It has been a really difficult year. Last year we didn't seem to have as many problems, although after the pandemic, a lot of our entertainment was kind of skeptical about where they were going to perform and how often. We're finding now that a lot of our national acts don't want to come to the West Coast. You throw extra money at them, they still aren't ready to come. They're sticking to a routing that they normally would do, whether it's, near Nashville, whether it's on the East Coast. So, don't worry, we're going to have 3 days of amazing entertainment, but it is just that much more difficult and that much more expensive, which you will see reflected in some of my numbers on my budget.
Do you use brokers or agents, or how does that work to go out onto the market? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, we do. We have an agent, we contract with Northwest Events and Marketing. And he has been with the Tillamook Fairgrounds for quite a few years, well before I was there. And he has a good relationship with most of the recording agencies, and they'll give you a roster of who is available in your particular area, or they'll give you just a general overall who's out there traveling. And, it ranges from, $2 to $5 million, all the way down to what the local fairs can afford. So you really have to pick and choose when you're looking at that list. And then you send out a request or a proposal, and then they'll get back with you. Usually takes a few weeks, sometimes a month. We start this back in December, looking for entertainment. We are fortunate that we can route with 2 other fairs and festivals, so it makes it kind of nice. So I can have somebody on Wednesday, someone can have them travel, and they'll have them on Thursday, then Friday they'll go to somewhere else, and then Saturday. So we route them in hopes that they will come to perform in more places. Sometimes you just have to buy them outright by yourself, and you pay a little bit more, but it's worth it. Does that answer that question?
Yes, thank you, that's good. So, yeah, keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, so I will just start off with our budget. Our opening beginning balance is considerably higher than it has been, which I am very happy about. We had about $250,000 that we planned that we won't actually spend at the end of this year. So we're planning to roll that over. We had another 250 some that were in our reserve accounts. So we have some reserves we set up last year will be for IT. We had some reserves that we have our TLT funding. And we're trying to tuck some of that away. And the reason being is we have so many projects that are kind of in the queue that when you submit, say, grant proposals, not actual applications, but proposals for things that we're doing on the ground, everybody wants a little bit of match money if possible. And that $250,000 only goes so far. So you could propose that you're gonna have match money, but if they come in, if 2 grants come in, we would be scrambling. So we've kind of set aside a reserve. We want to make sure that we can do our part when some of these grants are coming through the pipeline. So we will be starting off with quite a considerable more than we normally do. Excuse me. I think that that's probably the largest of the things in regards to our fair budget that I think you guys would be interested in. So would you like to start? I can tell you what our plans are. We currently have 1 office staff and a part-time office staff. We are looking to increase that by 1. I intended to do just a part-time for this coming year, get somebody on now who can train with, we have a high school senior. She's been with us since last year, and she will be moving on to college, obviously, after a fair. So we wanted to bring somebody on now who had a little bit of marketing or event experience and to tie them in with what we do every day. So I have money allocated for a half-time to full-time person. We have been going this last year and the year prior with just a single maintenance. Ryan does a fantastic job. He takes care of our entire grounds, inside and out, by himself. So we are looking to get a part-time person to help, especially on the weekends when we do our facility changeovers. So if we have an event on a Saturday night, we have to do changeover and clean floors to get ready for an event on Sunday. So we're looking for someone part-time who can do some maintenance, who can do some custodial work, and then facilities changeover for us. And we would bring them on as soon as I can get the applicant, or get the description out there, get somebody hired. And we would have them work full-time throughout the fair, and then go back to part-time for the off-season months.
So Cammy, your intention is to add another FTE, is that what I heard?
Yes, that is included in my budget proposal, the numbers that are there, yes. So we will be losing a half-time in the office. So I will be bringing on a half-time, and then they will eventually go to full-time. So it'll be pretty much what I have right now. It'll be an extra 20 hours a week, maybe 15 to 20 hours a week.
Okay, thank you for that.
And then maintenance will be a half-time permanent.
Which we used to have in the retired gentleman whose name I've sadly forgotten at the moment. We used to have one in it.
Yes. Yes, in 2020, we had and had all the years prior, we had a half-time maintenance person. And that's what we would like to go ahead and fill that position. We've been doing without it, but it's just coming now. We're just too busy, and I don't want to burn my one employee out because he's amazing.
And also in the past, we had a board member who provided staff and equipment and stuff that, equivalent to a maintenance person. And that was remarkably generous, but, it hasn't been replaceable at that level.
Correct. We have had the fortunate to have board members who have participated. We do have a different dynamic on our 7-person board right now. They're all but one are working full-time, which does make a big difference in how it helps us, to operate the facility. And we've been trying over the last few years to realize that we did have to start paying for things that we normally would get volunteer hours for. So we've slowly been increasing, adding to our budget as it goes along to make sure that we're paying for the services that we're getting, because we can't count on volunteerism. So even in our fair time, costs are rising, people are wanting to get paid for some of the work that they do, or they don't feel comfortable in volunteering like they did. Younger generations are not stepping up to volunteer like some of our older friends of the fair, we call them. So yes, everything is more expensive, and as we move forward, we want this to be sustainable in our budget. And if somebody wants to volunteer services and equipment, great. That's just more money that we have to spend. But we are planning to be sustainable by having it included in our budget.
Tammy, I was looking over your revenues here, and the convention center rent was $33,550 in 21-22, and you're budgeting $9,000 for the current budget. What was why did you have that unusual revenue during that period?
Yes, so the convention center, that was from the COVID testing, the COVID and flu clinics that were provided through the health department. So that was about, $20,000 or so dollars. That was invoiced. We didn't necessarily get paid the full amount, but so that's why that rent was so high, because it was what we billed out during that COVID period.
Oh, okay, great.
And we know that that's not going to happen next year.
Well, let's hope not.
How long do you know that?
We don't want to do that again.
Cammy said so.
I mean, from my standpoint, if it happens again and I receive that funding, great for me. However, I am not planning on that happening in quite that large of a scale. How's that?
Was that federal money that passed through the health department then? Probably was.
Yes, we did receive some of that funding, correct.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
So, Cammy, you're racing in pari-mutuel. Your pari-mutuel receipts are like $255. Your racing expenses were $271. But that doesn't count the additional people that you're bringing in the gate that actually go to the fair. I sort of took over from Bill selling all the racing programs and all. I know there's a ton of people that really do enjoy the races. Can you speak to that?
Yes, so you will see on both sides, we had increases. So this year, our revenue that we received from the Oregon Racing Commission, the Oregon Thoroughbred Association, and the Oregon HPPA, which is the Horse Breeders Association, we get funding. So in order to put on horse racing, they hire some of our personnel that is required to have their, we have our photo finish board, we have all kinds of things that are required for pari-mutuel horse racing. Then we have all of the machines where you see all of the betting going. There's a company that is provided to us that we have to pay for that, jockey insurance, jockey incentive, and then you have the actual payout of the money that people win. So we receive money from the state, or excuse me, from the Oregon Racing Commission. We receive some funding from these other, Quarter Horse Racing Association, the Oregon Thoroughbred, and the Oregon Breeders. So we have had an increase this year. So we had to show that in our revenue. We are starting our horse racing with our purses that get paid out when someone wins to a minimum of $4,000. It was $2,200 last year. So we run 33 races over the course of 4 days. So that money all goes into, it's basically just a pass through. I don't get to keep any of that because it all gets paid back out. But where we do would make our money is the larger the purses are, the more people that will come to bet on the horses and the racing, and that's where we make 21% on our betting.
Oh.
So the state gets the rest, we get a small portion of whatever runs through our gates. And so on the expense side, that's exactly what we have to do. The purses have been increased, so now we have to show that that money is going back out to be paid to those horsemen and those breeders.
Perfect.
While you're on that subject, could you also speak to what's happening like in Grants Pass and statewide? I remember, I think maybe you and I had a conversation, or I heard that a lot of the horse people will not come our direction unless it's worth their while. And if we lose Grants Pass or something goes on, it's not, they don't come to Oregon at all. Could you speak to that for a moment and what you know?
Yes, so the horse racing in Grants Pass is not what it was prior to. So that was called Grants Pass Downs. Now it has been taken back over by they're called SORA, Southern Oregon Horse Racing Association. And so they will have two things. They'll have a commercial meet, which replaces Grants Pass Downs, which actually came from way back when, up in Portland at Portland Meadows. So Grants Pass will now have a commercial race meet, and then they also do what's called the summer fairs meet. So they will race for X number of days in kind of in line with what we do. Well, so it would be Grants Pass, Union County, Prineville, and Tillamook. And what our group has done is we've all come together with Oregon Racing Commission, talked about how it can benefit all of the fair meets. And what they've come up with is that we all get the same amount. So we're trying to say our base is $4,000. Grants Pass will get that, I will get that, Prineville and Union. And then when you have people who donate money towards a specific race, like a stakes race or a family race, that money gets added to the pot. And then those races now become 6, 7, 8. We had one for $11,000 last year. And that incentivizes people who own horses to come and run the entire summer meet circuit, and everybody benefits. So that's kind of how it is in a nutshell, is we're all incentivizing those breeders, those horse owners and trainers to all come to every meet instead of just picking the ones that have the largest amounts of purse money.
Thank you, that's good. So would you say then Oregon is still in the horse racing business? Maybe not like it was when Portland Meadows was going, but there's enough incentive to keep people coming here from elsewhere, maybe even Kentucky or wherever.
Yeah, typically, they'll come from, California, they'll come from Washington, and they will come, starting out in Grants Pass and then moving forward and ending in Tillamook, and then they'll go back to Grants Pass.
Okay, thank you.
I will mention, David, you were asking about the money for pari-mutuel or horse racing in general. That was another thing that we were able to do is we keep the horses here right after they leave Prineville. So that'll be in July, right around like the 7th of July. Tillamook houses those horses and lets them utilize our track for exercising or just for getting out and getting some movement until our actual fair. And then we also keep them for another 2 weeks after fair until the stables open up again in Grants Pass. So because Grants Pass is having their county fair, all their stalls and stables are all taken up with animals for FFA and 4-H. So we keep them at our facility for 2 more weeks before they're allowed to go back down to Grants Pass. And we put together a proposal for myself, and Grants Pass put their proposal together. And we turned it in to the Oregon Racing Commission, and we were both funded for a daily stipend for those horses being at our facility. So I will be receiving a check for stabling through that program.
Perfect. One other question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So, and excuse me for not knowing this, but under revenue, your local community funding, $260,000. Can I ask what that is?
TLT.
Yes, the local community
Local
funding,
STT. Ah,
Sorry, I beat you to it, Cammie, it's
Sorry.
TLT.
oh, yeah.
Why don't we just say TLT? Okay, local community funding, okay.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
So, Kenny, could you talk just briefly about the connection between the county and the fair, and why it is that we oversee your budget, and how much county funding you actually receive?
For people who are watching.
For people
that
who are
might not-
watching who don't know, I think there may be some confusion as to whether the fair is a county department with general funds, and I think it would be beneficial if you would just sort of describe our relationship as well as, you know, what our role is in your budget and how much county funds you receive.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I can speak to the last 6-7 years that I've been a part of the fair organization and the whole county process. And basically, we are not a county department, although we act as though we are a county department in all ways possible, whether it's policies, whether it's procedures. So it was that the fair would actually receive some general fund, and then that general fund money was actually turned into paying off the grandstand loan. So when the new grandstand was built, there was a loan that was taken out. So that general fund was going to pay that grandstand loan back. So we weren't actually receiving the funds we were on paper, right, in our budget. And then once that loan was paid off, then we started looking at TLT and how can the TLT help the fairgrounds. We started by going through the same the same application process for grants. And it took a few years for us to kind of get our feet under us, but we were able to get a few TLT facility grants approved through the county, which you do see on my budget, and you also see it on the county's budget that Rachel just went over. And then last year, I believe, was the year that the funds are actually allocated specifically to the fairgrounds, similar to the museum, to help us facilitate some of the projects that we have going on. And some of the repairs, some capital projects, some projects that just spring up. But it's a way that we can use that funds to either get more grant funding, or we can actually use it to expend it on an actual project that we have currently going. So we have to, by the fair statute, or the statutes for the fair, the ORS 565, we must provide the county with the information on what we're using our funds for. We have to go through the budget process, just like anyone else that is receiving any money from the county. or from the state. It's a requirement that we have, that it runs through our county seat. And so that's why we are here today to talk about what we're doing with the fair funds and the fair off-season revenue. It's kind of all compiled into one. And we appreciate the, I would say, the openness. I think we have a good relationship between the county commissioners, county liaisons, the staff. They're here to help the fairgrounds in any capacity that we need. We pay a moderate service fee for those processes to happen. So when we use the treasurer, when we use Rachel in project management or oversight for us, our county council, all of our insurance across the fairgrounds, those kinds of things, we're giving that money back to the county because we're using those services.
Thank you, Tammy. I think that's helpful for people to understand that you're organized under a completely different statute. You're not simply a department of the county, although in many ways you function as such. But really, your revenues and expenses are generally as a special revenue fund. You pay for what you do at the fairgrounds. It's not something the general fund dollars typically pay for, so. Thank you.
Correct. We try to, we do. We like to say that we operate independently, meaning that our expenses and our revenues, other than the TLT funds, we generate all on our own. We expend those on our own. We hire and fire our staff. The commissioners are responsible for selecting or deselecting, in some cases, the county fair board, and that is where your management and control comes in. The fair board makes the decision on what I do day to day and the overall management of the fair.
Thank you.
One other thing from a historical perspective, that mention was made of the grandstands, and some people watching or listening may not know that the cost, as I recall, to replace them, and they were about to be condemned, was $750,000. And the TLT Credit Union, now part of Fiber Federal out of Longview, but at the time they advanced $750,000 with a 10-year repayment at zero interest. So the county paid back $75,000 per year for 10 years. And so another good example of community resources stepping up and people saying, hey, we love our fair, we're going to take care of it, and we'll lend you $750,000 and won't even charge you interest.
That is nice.
And so, people should know that as part of the record as well, because the fair, like I said early on, the fair is about as much a part of Tillamook County as fishing and milking cows. So, anyway.
I agree. Mr. Chair?
Yeah, yes.
So, Cammie, you were talking about the relationship, and I agree completely that we have a great relationship, great partnership between the county and the fair, and we're grateful for the good work that you do with the fair, you and your whole team. And I think to Commissioner Scar's point, people do get confused about the relationship, and so to spell it out a little more, the county owns the fairgrounds and the county owns the buildings, but we do not operate the fair, and you're not our employee, and so the fair operates the fair. The fair board is the governing body for operating the fair, and so it's a terrific relationship from my perspective, and I agree, it's an institution in Tillamook County and something really, really special and beloved. And I thought maybe we could talk for a minute about the TLT funding, because we have some money that hasn't been spent yet in TLT funding. We talked about a little earlier before you came on about the TLT funding for the fair for the electrical project, so maybe you could give us an update on that. And then also there was TLT funding for the pavilion project, and you and I had talked briefly about the possibility of moving some of that money to a water project. So, I'll share that with this group. The fair is required by the city to do something about their stormwater. So the stormwater system is not working correctly. So So all the stormwater that's moving across the fairgrounds is going into the Tillamook City water treatment. And so that's overwhelming their water treatment center, and stormwater doesn't need to be treated the same way as sewer. So it's overburdening their system. So the city asked us a couple of years ago, I think, because Leanne Welch was still there, the city came to the fair and asked, how are you gonna, we need you to commit to taking care of this, and how are you gonna do it? And they set us up on a multi-year plan to accomplish it, and I think we've done the first couple steps, but we need to move forward with the repair and diverting that stormwater. So in the meantime, the county has a project going it's not happening yet, but it should happen soon, hopefully, depending on FEMA, to divert stormwater that heads to the former Kilch's house. So that mitigation project is on Chris Laedy's list, and it's already been designed and engineered. So my thought was, okay, well, if we're going to mitigate stormwater that goes to Kilch's house, why would we not mitigate stormwater from the fairgrounds at the same time? So I think maybe next week, Cammie and Chris Laedy and Rachel and I have a meeting set up to talk about that, like how can we incorporate these projects, and if that's possible, should we divert $250 that we have awarded to the fairgrounds for the pavilion renovation? Should we just move that to the water project if we can do the water project first? And it's my understanding that we're not good to go. The pavilion project's important, but we're not ready to get started on it anyway. So I'll stop talking there, Cammie, and let you fill in the blanks.
Well, thank you, Mary Faith. That was a very good summary. So yes, we, on our sewer and water project, and I did put that down as one of our capital projects on my spreadsheet, just because I wanted to identify that it was something that had to be done this coming year. So there's a couple of things that we've had it off camera. We know where the problems are, or most of the problems are. But it's bigger than that, because what happens is we will have to tear up the asphalt in the courtyard to identify where some of those collection drains are actually going to. They could not find them via camera or smoke test. So we will have to tear that up once we have a plan, because certainly we don't want to tear it up to find out where the last few connections are until we have a plan of where's the water going to go. So originally, when they talked about the FEMA water mitigation in the West Field that you were just speaking of, they were going to allow us to do some kind of like a connection. They were going to give us an access point. So when we funnel all the water off the fairgrounds, we would know where it's going to go. And then we would have to take care of somehow getting that into a whole nother piping system and getting it into that connection to the West Field. So I still think that that's a plan, but it would make sense to have us do it all at the same time. So it's just a matter of actually getting the work done. I don't know how long it's going to take for FEMA, but I'm on a 3-year plan with the city, and so I really want to do my due diligence in going to the next phase, which would be designing where that water system is going to drain off to, and how are we going to install it. And then on top of that, so there's been a lot of legislative activity across, all of the fairs. There's probably 8 bills that are in the House and the Senate right now. They're either at Ways and Means, or some haven't been reviewed. Some have already, died in process. So when our J.L. Wilson is our representative, he is our lobbyist for all of the fairs and the state fair. And so we've been asked to put together projects that we think that the legislation could look at and say, okay, you're asking for this extra money for all of the fairgrounds across the state. What are you going to use it for? So the theory was it would be used for capital projects similar to the way that they did the courthouses, the way that they've done the colleges across the state. Everybody puts in their projects and it's prioritized. So I included, I think I have 4 projects included, one of those being the water and sewer mitigation problem. One, because this happened way back when, was the West Power project, which was selected, and I'm receiving funding for that right now. And then we also had the main building, the dome building, because it's somewhat historic value. We needed to have the engineering and design of that building, which is in our strategic plan. So I put that project in. So I think there was 4 total. Also including a new shop building that would be able to house some of our equipment that is currently stored outside. So those things, all those moving pieces and parts are all a part of my budget. I've added some funding in there, thinking if we get one of those, we're gonna get some funds. I'm gonna have to spend some money as well. It's going to be a Tetris game to figure out what actually is gonna come in and when. The nice part about the funding is we'll know after the next session. So I'm guessing in, what is that, May? I'll know what the funding sources will be for next year. But I didn't know in time to put it into my budget, so.
Okay, what other questions might we have of Cammie?
Could you give us an update on the electrical project?
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. Yes, so we did receive $277,777 from the state, which is being funneled through Business Oregon. It was a grant application that we had to submit, and that is the current money that I am receiving. So we have hired a project manager. He is reaching out to try and get a electrical engineer. And the reason we need an electrical engineer is to figure out what it is that we need across our facilities as far as the load capabilities, so that when PUD gets ready to install that 3-phase power, they'll know, where are we putting things and what's the load going to be on them. So they're working on that, which did include the pavilion. Obviously, if we were doing the expansion, it would need more electrical for that facility as well. So that's where we are there. We received our first $55,000. We're expected to receive another $75,000 here in the next couple of months. It is a reimbursement, so we have to show our expenses and get that money reimbursed. We're hoping to get the bulk of it before the end of this fiscal year. And I've allocated the last power project payment to come after the fiscal year of $75,000. So we're excited to finally get started on that, and we're very hopeful that our project manager will be able to start jumping on the next project as well. And we have allocated money in our own budget to have additional project management services other than this one TLT funded one.
Thank
And
you.
to answer your question about the pavilion, just really quickly, the pavilion is still on our minds, but after our conversation, we have talked about, should we shift gears and try to take care of this one that seems a little bit more as an emergency, because we need to fulfill that, or maybe there's a different way that I can fund it, but it is a conversation I would be more than happy to have with Rachel and yourself and anyone, and Chris, to see how we can get these started to get them implemented.
Thank you.
Anything else for Cammie? Treasurer, let's ask our treasurer, have you got anything you would like to add to this budget?
No, I'm glad that conversation we had between Mary Faith and Cammie kind of moved away from the pavilion and tying in with the water. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, well, thank you very much then. We've got our, I think everything we need, and looks pretty straightforward to me, so we will deal with that towards the end of the week.
Thank you, Cammie.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Hope you
you.
feel
Thank
better.
you.
Okay, let's see, the remainder of our time before lunch is Rachel, followed possibly by our facilities, and we're about 30 minutes behind, but maybe we can cram it all into the next hour here, so some of this should be fairly straightforward, but maybe not. So let's go to Rachel and start with the parking plan down south.
Okay. And I'll leave it up to your discretion how much you want to dive into the Kiwanda Corridor project.
Well, let me ask the budget committee then, do you want recap in detail or sketchy or not at all? Or what's your pleasure? I think we all know something about it, but there are others who may be watching or will watch in the future that would like at least some basic information.
As commissioners, we know
It's time.
quite a bit,
Yeah.
so given the time that we have and that we're running a little behind, maybe just an overview for those watching, but not get too far into the.
Yeah, that's what I was going
Okay.
to suggest.
Yeah.
Maybe could you do a 3 to 5 minute
Yeah.
summary, something like
Okay,
that,
yep.
so we at least are all on the same page?
So we are implementing the Kiwanda Corridor project, which is it's a culmination and evolution over at least a decade of work that the county's trying to implement to improve the experience that visitors have when they come to the Pacific City Woods area, as well as improving the livelihood of the residents that live there that are impacted by tourism. The Kiwanda Corridor project includes 5 primary elements: reconstructing the Cape Kiwanda parking lot, relocating Webb Park to a county parcel to the northeast of the current Webb Park location, constructing a multi-use path from the Cape Kiwanda lot south to Bob Straub State Park, developing the Jensen property that the county acquired a couple of years ago. It's almost 6 acres, and completing the development of the Nestucca Valley Community Alliance's skate park and other park amenities that's located on property owned by Tillamook Lightwave. So the first project, the first component that we're implementing of the Kiwanda Corridor project, which we talked about this morning in the TLT discussion, is the Cape Kiwanda parking lot reconstruction. We received a bid for $5.5 million. The board will be considering the construction contract for that next week. The timeline is 3 phases for the reconstruction of the parking lot, starting as soon as the contract is signed, getting the new restroom foundation actually, let me go through the scope. So it includes a new public restroom. The existing restroom will be demolished, new restroom relocated, shower facilities, a portion of the multi-use path where it exists next to the Cape Kiwanda parking lot that'll serve as a trailhead, 7,000 square foot civic overlook, reconfiguring the 55,000 square foot parking lot, new landscaping, stormwater improvements, utilities, improved garbage and recycling collection, other amenities such as benches, improved lighting, wayfinding kiosks, etc., and EV charging stations. So from now until the end of June, and then we're going to take a hiatus over the summer so we're not minimizing impacts to the parking lot. We're going to construct the foundation of the new restroom, and then this fall we're going to work on the north side of the parking lot. When that concludes, move to the south side of the parking lot. So we won't have to close the parking lot in its entirety at any point of time. All of the work being completed by next summer. So that's the goal. Looking at paying it out of TLT funds, $490,000 out of the parking day use fees, which are in the Fund 133, as well as the Public Works Department's able to contribute about $30,000 out of the bike ped funds because of the multi-use path that's located there. So that's the Kiwanda Corridor project, and the construction of it is built into Fund 133 with that large transfer coming out of TLT. So on the screen share here, you'll see, I just wanted to show there's been a lot of discussions about the revenues being generated and where these funds are going from Cape Kiwanda, and this just shows a snapshot of between when the parking fee, because there didn't used to be a parking fee at Cape Kiwanda, so this was new in March 2021. actually it was in January, but this is when we started collecting. Thank you, Bill.
$10 bill.
Please, you gotta smile over there.
No.
So between March 2021 and January 2023, this is where we've been spending the revenues that have been coming out of just Cape Kiwanda. A lot of it, the majority of it goes to the Parks Department because we pay them through intercounty transfers to manage the site. We also pay a destination manager, Brooke Wintergreen, who does a lot of support for me in managing this project and some of the day-to-day things that we're doing down there. Website, other outreach. We pay for the shuttle service, the trolley that's new to the area, wayfinding, and the lot needs periodic sand clearing. So that is, and we also have the parking ambassador. So that's new this year, or last year. Also wanted to share, just highlight, this is a table of the revenues that have come in. The left is just Cape Kiwanda, the right is the Pacific City turnaround. What I wanted to highlight here is between 2021 and 2022, these are our full month comparisons of revenues of the day passes that came in. This doesn't consider annual pass revenues as well, which is prorated in other data. But the asterisks here, this is when Starla started, our parking ambassador. And so everybody was wondering if we had somebody around the lot doing some passive enforcement. She's not writing any parking tickets. Passive enforcement, encouraging people to pay, as well as just providing general information about the area in Cape Kiwanda. Would that increase compliance? And it appears to be doing that every month, except for there was a short drop in December, which is low anyway. She's not at the Pacific City turnaround lot. So seems to be money well spent having her. We've heard nothing but great things about her. Doug probably knows her.
I do.
Yeah, she's a part-time employee, less than 20 hours a week. She has a flexible schedule. She's only been working less than 5 hours a week through the winter, but she just had a bump up this last month. And so these are great numbers to see. So that model is working. And as you know, we tried a bunch of different models of how we could get somebody out there, and we'd struggled for a long time just getting someone. So I think we've done really well with hiring Starla. Okay, so revenues, proposing a beginning balance of $430,000. This fund has been accruing funds because, as you know, we have had a placeholder to hire a sheriff's deputy to be on site doing this parking enforcement, and because of a lot of different factors that hasn't come to fruition. We have Starla that's working. I talked to Sheriff Brown and preparing the budget, and he was supportive of, at this time, of removing that from the budget. So you'll see a decrease in several items because we're not paying for a vehicle, guns, vests, the deputy. So there's a substantial drop in those expenses in this budget this year, but that is why we do have a carryover, because other than the deputy associated expenses, we have been zeroing out for everything else. We have some rent that's coming in from the Jensen property units. There's a couple of units there. Annual parking fee revenues, that's the prorated portion across the park system. There's a drop in the daily fee revenue because I went through an exercise to determine how many parking spaces we would be impacted through construction, and tried to come up with an estimate of a realistic estimate of we are going to have construction in the area, and so it's not going to be a straight carryover of what we've been seeing for revenues. So that's why that's dropped, and then you see the large transfer, the 5.18 from TLT. So that rounds out the revenues. The only staff here is the parking ambassador, and that's the part-time employee. The contracted services, a large portion of that is our consultant, was Murray Smith, now under the name of Consor, supporting the Kiwanda Corridor project. And also the sand maintenance, the transportation shuttle, parking ambassador, a lot of the items that you saw in that pie chart are covered under the contracted services. The inter-county transfer to parks, those costs have been increasing, so I updated that, or increased that to be in line with what they've been actually billing to this fund. And then under the capital outlay, because we're talking about infrastructure that will result from the construction, that's where the 5.258 is coming from for the parking lot infrastructure.
This is another one where my book doesn't seem to align with what's on the screen.
There was, by the time you got me those,
Okay, just, thank you. Just, you might tell us that when we get to that page to say it's gonna look different than what you have, because
Sorry.
I'm busily trying to figure it out. If I have the right page or if there's something else in here. So
the 196 land sales.
So as you start, if you could say, this one will be different than what's in the book, I will stop.
I don't know
dig.
what's in
I
the
totally
book.
understand.
Yeah, I just know what I said,
totally
Sean.
understand that there's not
Yeah.
enough time to do it all, and that's no way meant to be a criticism. It's meant to help the feeble mind among us like myself who are busy flipping pages. So thank you, sorry, go ahead.
Rachel, can I ask you a question
Please.
about contracted services?
Yes.
Someone asked me in the community recently whether the county is paying for the trolley in Pacific City, and I said, I think so, but I'll ask.
I don't know the full cost of the trolley. I can tell you we give $25,000 to them. We gave it to them last year. I think there might have been, maybe that was, we didn't get a bill until just a couple of weeks ago for the trolley.
Okay.
And I think there might have been some confusion with the transition in leadership at the transportation district,
Okay.
but it was budgeted last year. It was just paid out, and we're budgeting this year to pay $25,000. I don't know if that covers the full cost of the trolley,
Okay,
but
thank
the
you.
short answer is yes.
Thank you.
I think that is it for 133. So I was excited that when in crunching all of these numbers that, because up until 2 months ago, I didn't think this fund would be able to contribute anything to the parking lot. So the fact that I was able to squeeze out around 490, I was pretty excited about.
Sometime back when all this, we're talking about this right after the TLT went in, I know there was some other commissioners sitting in where these folks are, and they were saying, well, why don't you people down in South County incorporate, and we won't have to mess with this. And I kept asking at the time for, how about doing this or something with the restroom, and the answer came back, well, you know, if you incorporate, you could take care of all that and leave us alone. That's ancient history, but I just thought I'd throw that in. So I, you know, just speaking for my part of South County, you know, this is a wonderful return, and I think it's a lasting investment that will be around for many years to come and do some good things, and I think more people appreciate it than you probably know. We get, you know, feedback at our chamber meetings and other meetings, the CAC and all, and, you know, there's lots of questions and some comments, and maybe questions like you said about the trolley and other specifics, but by and large, you know, there are people who grumble about anything, and then there's the rest of the larger group that says, hey, it's either about time or good for you or thank you very much, and you know, they can see stuff happening. And I think the biggest thing that will happen is when you actually see some equipment at Cape Kiwanda and doing some other things in the dirt turns, and people are going to say, hey, okay, I'm with you, I saw it, I believe it, we're good, keep going.
Thank you.
So anything else on this one? The 133. All right, then let's go down, want to do the board and ARPA and all of that was next. And then again, that's Rachel, and so if there aren't any questions on the parking, let's go ahead and do that one.
Okay, so I'm hoping your budgets, or are you gonna screen share?
I'm gonna screen share
Okay.
this.
The only one that should be different is the ARPA, and I'll screen share mine when we get to that. So the BOC budget's pretty similar to last year. There's a large travel budget, it keeps going up. I've got a huge spreadsheet that if you want to go into that, we can go through it. Isabel put that together and working with the commissioners on that. BOC budget supports the 3 commissioners, one of the county council, the second county council is under legal contracted services. My position, the executive assistant and the board assistant in the BOC office. Under contracted services, in reviewing the ARPA money, there may be a reduction we can make here. Right now it's $88,500. We've got Jane Scott's videotaping of our weekly board meetings, a small amount, $4,500 for a procurement program that we're a part of. And then we have $42,000 for our grant writing team. It's a consultant that the Association of Oregon Counties is using, and I think there's a lot of support for that, so we built it into the budget, but I think there's a way that we can fund it out of ARPA, so it's not out of the general fund, so I'll just throw that out. As well as we've started a strategic planning effort, which has a lot of different facets with Portland State University. They're working with Clatsop County and others. We're under contract and currently negotiating the first task order. We have $75,000 in ARPA. There will need to be more that funds it, but we're not sure what that's going to be. This is also something that could potentially come out of ARPA or next fiscal year, depending on when that $75,000 runs out. So I think we could also pull the $25,000 I have here, so we could take $67,000 out of the $88,500. If that is palatable to folks.
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
think that's great. I'm particularly interested in looking at some of the one-time costs that
Yeah.
come up like that, because I think we want to get this budget boiled down to the things that absolutely must happen, so we just have that real number. So I appreciate that very much, Rachel.
Everything else is pretty static. So unless there's questions on the BOC budget, I will keep moving along. I have several other budgets.
So my only comment is on the contingency that you have in non-cap. We have a contingency
In what?
fund. Non-cap. Okay.
1,000?
Yeah. So we have a contingency in the general fund budget as a whole. Would it make more sense to keep it there rather than?
I'll let Commissioner Scarr speak to that. So everybody has always built in contingency, and there might be a new strategy this year to do that, so.
Yeah, Sean and I have
If we
been
wanna do
talking
that,
about contingency as one of the areas that we feel, as we've gone through the budget, is overstated. And it's overstated because we have asked each department to hold contingency, and then we have held contingency in the overall. And at the end of the year, it is not all being spent. And so what's happening is we are over budgeting our contingency, which then creates a situation where we have to under budget other potentially needed items, such as ongoing personnel, in order to hold these contingencies, which are never 100% spent. In fact, Sean and I were kind of poking at it to see how often do we use contingency and what percentage of what we have.
Last time was in 13, 14, 15 when we had a timber shortfall.
Which we now have a revenue stabilization fund that is being built in to level out that timber shortfall. So one of the strategies that we'd like to look at is to pull that contingency out of individual budgets, place it into a larger contingency, and all that would mean for departments is they would need to talk to the treasurer with a budget justification as to why they needed that contingency. So it's one of the things Sean and I have been talking about that we wanted to kind of have in this conversation probably on Thursday, along with that flattening of the timber revenue in our revenue projections. Trying to really use our cash better, more transparently and more correctly.
And it's just for everyone out there, the reason that this is important is because we're required by law to have a balanced budget. So when all this contingency and wish list stuff is in the budget, in order to balance it, sometimes we have to take things out that really are meat and bones to departments. So that's just one of the ways that we should be looking at this. So for everyone out in the audience, and especially the department heads, that's one of the things that we're looking to do to make our budget balance. That's not to say that contingencies are going away. We're just gonna need to have further conversations down the road with this happen.
Yeah, correct, because we don't want departments to think that they would have no contingency.
Right.
It's just that with everybody holding one, only 50% of people or fewer are using them. And we're also holding a large contingency that Sean puts in to account for things that might happen. And we are just over contingencying ourselves at the cost of operationalizing ourselves. So it's one of those pieces that's been challenging as we look at each year's end of budget and how much that is budgeted that goes unspent. That's where this number's coming from for us in our analysis is a lot of money goes unspent, but that's at the cost of what people, they need an additional person or those kinds of things that we say no to because we don't think we have the money, but it's because everybody's holding contingency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do think I would just offer, I think there needs to be a little bit of a balance. I'm thinking of, because there's costs that we know we're going to incur, but maybe don't know the exact amount of, like in facilities. We wouldn't want to take the facilities contingency out of that because there will be stuff that comes out and then we're constantly doing transfers or different charges, or I'm not sure how that would look, or coming to you every time there's one. And so I think we should have some contingencies built in, but maybe they're less. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of back and forth getting permissions to spend contingencies. So I'm not sure what that balance is, but I think there should still be some. I'm looking at the next budget, the land sale for, changing keys and new locks and things that we know that come up when we get properties. And if I don't have that, then I'm asking. you know what I'm trying to say.
No, I completely agree. I think this is new territory for us. So we'll be finding the right balance of that. But when we end a budget year and turn $2 million back because it didn't get spent, and that was things that people would have liked to have been able to have in personnel and otherwise, we have to dig into that and understand why it's not being spent. Some of it in the last couple of years has been personnel we couldn't hire. But even when we removed that factor, there was still quite a bit of money in there that was just budgeted and never spent because people feel they need to make sure they've padded their budgets enough for just in case, which would be totally fine if we were not also budgeting overall for just in case. We're budgeting twice for just in case.
And just in case isn't difficult to do because it's a board order line item transfer before the board at a meeting.
Yeah.
So it's not.
Part of the problem with the two contingencies, you gotta have offsetting revenue to have a balanced budget.
Correct.
And so you overstate one by understating the other, sort of.
Right.
But I've seen organizations that had one contingency, period. You had exactly what you were going to spend, theoretically. But the contingency's over here controlled by someone else, so you have to make your case again to get money if you need it. So maybe there's a way to balance it in the middle. Like you said, you have some in the departments and then there's a bigger one. And if the roof falls in, then you go down to her office and ask for help.
It's an emergency.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you. We're trying to revisit and think about how we do this so that we can, exactly what you said, Doug, find that middle ground that says, let's not overstate the amount that we're holding for just in case, because that takes revenue to be held just in case.
And then you end up with a larger ending balance that could have gone elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so, it's always a balancing act. But so
Right.
far, the best thing I've heard is the levelizing of some of these, the sine wave that goes like this. You can levelize that. You're going to take a lot of the mystery out of what's next and what's next year and the year after that.
Correct, and we'll talk on Thursday about our projections for next year and the year after that and the year after that. And you'll see why much of this is absolutely crucial, because the beginning fund balance that we have built is going to be, portions of it will be used just to keep our operations where we're going. So this becomes very, very important for us to really hone in tightly on our actual needed budgets. So.
I think that's a good plan. You know how the federal government ends most of their bills, appropriation bills, they have a paragraph that says, and we hereby appropriate such sums as may be necessary. Hence, you have a deficit. Anyway, that's another subject.
Sorry, thank you.
Yes. Okay, keep going there. Are you going to go in now to land stuff or?
Yes, any proposed changes right now to the DOC budget besides? Land sale, that should be accurate, what you have in front of you. The main point here is we are not getting any new properties that have structures that need to be cleaned up. And so we've spent quite a bit of money in the last couple of years dealing with that and working with the solid waste department. So you'll see a drop in contracted services.
If I replace, those may not have been replaced.
Okay.
How much do you show for contract?
Replaced with what?
That was part of the updated ones that I may or may not have printed out and replaced in those books as I was doing it.
Okay,
So how much do you show for contracted services?
13.8.
Does it say 13.8? For contracted
This
services?
got past the VOCC narrative,
Yes,
and then the next one
Okay.
is 196 American Rescue Plan.
So you're on 1160 now?
Yes.
We had a big land sale year. We currently have 4 contracts that are carrying over. Some, if the property is less, if it's over $20,000 when they purchase it, we provide the opportunity to carry a contract. We have 4 outstanding there. We sold 12 properties at auction this year for a total of $153,471, and then we sold another 4 outside of auction, totaling $86,000. So, and we're only taking title to another, I think, 7.
Are those foreclosures or something
Yeah,
else?
all foreclosures, yeah. All foreclosures. So that is a pretty straightforward budget. This also supports Isabel and I going to the property managers conference annually. Noticing in the headlight.
So I showed that was gonna end up netting out $657,850.
Correct. Yep.
And what is the restriction on that, once we have it in our hands as cash?
So, when we sell a tax foreclosed property, there's a statutory formula that has to go through it. It's the same one as the timber revenue in ORS 275. The first tier of that is, one of the first tiers is that we can recoup our expenses. Up until, I think last year was the first year, we have never been in the black, so we have always kept the money. So now that we are in the black, any revenues that the county has received from tax foreclosed properties on top of us recouping our expenses,
Yep.
and you'll see miscellaneous and services 312, it's in really small font. That's also money that we can recoup off the top of sales that were costs associated with the foreclosure process. So that is actually money that we had never received up until I found this a couple of years ago, that we were foregoing, that we could have been getting. So that's additional revenue. Then, once we are made whole, it goes through the formula and is distributed to everybody. So last year was the first year that taxing districts received money from our land sales, and then we would get our 20%.
Oh, okay.
Wow, so of that 657, that will go through that taxing district formula after you pull off the expenses.
Yes.
Good job, that's awesome. I hope some of our special districts are listening.
They were small checks, I think, but it was nice.
It's a
They were like, why am I getting this?
Exactly.
There was multiple phone calls.
Okay,
What's
thank
this?
you, I was curious, that's excellent.
Check on a bill, how about that?
Right, and we get our little piece of it too.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, Fund 100. You will see a big increase this year. This is the fund that supported the Southern Flow Corridor implementation over the years, as well as the Shiloh levee mowing activities. This year there's an increase because I'm building in the spending authority to repair the Shiloh levee. There's a lot of momentum this year. I've got 4 different funding sources we're looking at. Business Oregon through Special Public Works Fund. Representative Javity and Senator Weber are moving an ask through the legislature as we speak. Actually, there's some hearings coming up that there might be some testimony at. We also submitted a request to Senator Merkley and Representative
Competitors came on.
Yes, thank you. It's bubbling around in my yes. For the congressional directed spending, and then we're contributing 25,000 to round out the need here. But I'm hoping some of this funding comes through. But it looks like we might be able to actually repair the shadow levee this coming year. So that is largely what you see reflected, as well as the annual mowing costs from the contracted services. So you'll see, again, construction costs largely captured in the capital outlay line item.
Just a very brief explanation there on the Shiloh levee. That was built by Army Corps, protects Highway 101. Then it was just turned over to the county. We've been responsible for it for a lot of years.
Well, we signed an agreement that said we would take it over. Just to clarify,
Somebody way before
did.
us did
That's
that,
right.
said,
That's
yeah, we'll take it.
We'll take it.
forever.
So
Yeah.
it needs repair. It's not in great shape. So this is a great opportunity for us to get it fixed, which is perfect.
How far does that go? I know where it starts there by the Shiloh, but how far east does it go?
Just right behind the Shiloh. It doesn't go that far east. The river makes the bend, goes behind the Shiloh, and then it stops.
Yeah.
It's only 1,200 feet, and it doesn't go all the way to the bridge.
But we can get ODOT involved, because if it goes, it's gonna shut down 101. So,
For a long time.
yeah, true.
When you drive by there at a full tide, the water's way above the cars.
So it's important that we try to get it fixed.
Yep.
I think we're in a good position to do that.
Okay, Fund 105. This is the Forest Timber Trust Fund that holds this is where any legal expenses in defending the timberlands, this is where the Lynn County lawsuit was paid out of. This is where the Toho lawsuit that just got settled is paid out of. Council Forest Trust Lands dues and Oregon Timber Counties Coalition dues are also supported out of here. And so the way this fund works is usually our funds are based on the revenues, and then you're balancing out that with the expenses. This one, it's what are the expenses, and then that's the revenues from the forest revenues that are put in there. Because we can take the forest revenues off of the top, fund this fund, and then the rest goes through the distribution formula. So that's how we arrived at the state timber revenue amount of $56,000.
And it's important that we have this money. I mean, the number of lawsuits that we have to get involved with, just a good example is the Coho lawsuit. We did not want the state Department of Justice to control the way that the lawsuit was going, so we did intervene, and that cost us money. It does.
Yeah, and so you'll see a big drop in the legal services from 110 down to 30,000 because the lawsuits have been settled or are settling with the final bills coming in. But there's a contingency item here of $20,000 for potential forthcoming lawsuits that we may
So
be
you bring
expecting.
in separate counsel then for the lawsuits,
Yes.
working directly for the county's interests?
Correct. Okay. Title III, Fund 106. Lots of activity in this fund this last year. We have about 91,000 in outstanding grant awards. That's split around 61,000 for ODF for the Firewise program, the yard debris removal program, and almost $31,000 for the sheriff's office for search and rescue items and staffing. And there's a placeholder of $50,000, which is an estimate of new revenues that we would receive, and we never know when those are coming. But if and when they do, we do a public solicitation, which is usually just ODF for the Firewise program and search and rescue with the sheriff's office, because there's only a couple of criteria that these funds can go towards. That's moving along well. And ARPA, I'm going to share my screen for this one. I sent some updated spreadsheets. There were some things that were identified that weren't in the budget, like interest, so we added those in.
So there will be updated sheets.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Just tell me
Okay.
you're on.
I emailed this to everybody this morning, but I don't expect that you saw it or had time to open it. Okay, so this is my tracker for ARPA. I'll cut right to the bottom line. We've been spending it. We have outstanding grant awards. And Sean has also used this as a fund where the LATCF funds are going, local assistance and tribal consistency funds. So we've received $330,000 already. We're expecting to receive another $330,000 maybe in May, although there's no official timeline. So I've built into all these numbers the other influx of the 330. So yesterday, we have 3.5, we've received all the ARPA money.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have 3.5 in cash. That's what's sitting here, including the first round of the LATCF money. We expect another $6,000 in interest to come in, and if we get the extra $330 this fiscal year, we would be sitting, if we didn't spend anything else, which that'll be my next number, we would have 3.8 in ARPA, in the ARPA fund. The estimated expenses from now till the end of the fiscal year is about $1 million in the outstanding awards that you have already said you want to fund. That's a projection, which gives us a beginning fund balance of 2.8. So how are we going to spend the 2.8 next year? You have 2.39, of which you've already said this is what we're funding. You have 434,000 as a balance to spend. So nobody run out and spend it just yet, because I can see the wheels spinning on it. But that is where we are.
So what are the limitations on that?
It's pretty open. Yeah, we've used it for a lot of different things, including the employee incentives that were paid this last year. One-time payments that were made.
No ongoing costs. We're discouraged during the process.
But otherwise, general government
Yeah.
was the tag, so.
It's gone though.
Yes.
Right.
I did build in here, because there's been ongoing discussion about how we're funding TCV, the court security at the front door. You awarded $65,000. That is gone as of this month. I have built into this what's already going to be paid for it, or out of these funds. I've built in through this next fiscal year, so through June 30, paying for them. So TCB for this next fiscal year is built into here.
Through June 30 of 24.
Yes.
Are the rates going to go up?
So, other ways to spend this, I have some notes here. That's just a tracking on how the employee leave was paid, or the employee benefits were paid. So I added 76 for the additional court security. There's also a little increase. You're wondering how this money how did we come up with so much more money, because it was all spent. One of the projects was canceled that you approved through the competitive solicitation, and there were some projects that were completed but they didn't fully spend the award, and then you had the influx of the LATCF money. So that's just some tracking here. Ideas that we've thrown around for how to spend the remaining balance is the grant writer that was in the BOC budget. That could come out of here. There's a lot of different things we're talking about through the bargaining that we're in the middle of with ASME right now. And non-union employees, there may be some expenditures that come out of whatever comes out of bargaining that could come out of here. And future years, another year of TCB. I think that'll be spent by then probably, but this money has to be obligated by December 31st of 24, spent by 2026. So we could, in theory, continue to spend it on TCB if we wanted to. That's your ARPA snapshot. and that the budget itself, this is my tracker, the budget itself is a beginning balance of 2.8, $20,000 in interest, and then 2.8 in contracted services, with the detail of the projects down below. So this is what you want to look at for details. Questions on ARPA?
That's good news. Thanks for the good news.
One way or another, I feel that the grant writer is gonna be extremely important. A good grant writer can more than pay for themselves. It's amazing, we do not have a grant writer in Trumbull County.
Well, we do. Her name's
Other than
Rachel.
But she is so busy with all sorts of different things. I think AOC, the Association of Oregon Counties, is bringing on this company as a grant writer. Again, a good grant writer will absolutely pay for themselves. Whether we pay with general fund money or whether it comes out of ARPA. I think ARPA could be a good use of those funds.
ARPA would be a great way to kick it off and see how it works for us, right? Without us having to commit general fund and to really see what the benefits are. I absolutely believe we will see the benefits. I keep passing things to Rachel. Hey, what do you think about this one? Hey, what do you think about that one? And you know, the answer is just, yeah, it looks great, and who and when is gonna have time to pull that off, so.
You just tell her, how quickly can you get to it, Rachel?
The raw property might be another place you could pull from.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes.
We've talked about that for
I know.
8 years I was in office.
I know. And it never got done.
Well, by golly, Bill, we're getting things done.
There you
I
go.
know.
There
You
you
left it
go.
queued up and we're working on it.
Are you saying I didn't get anything done?
No.
Did you miss the second part I said? You left it queued up for us. Somebody had to do the pre-contemplation.
Take the blows to the body.
Thank you for that.
$10 bill.
Okay, so what else have you got on under ARPA and et cetera?
I have a couple more. Fund 310, the annex. So you may recall the county's been working toward the implementation of a 3-phase, multi-year, multi-million-dollar project to resolve space concerns and security issues in the courthouse. The first phase was switching rooms with circuit court. So this used to be courtroom 108. We used to be up in A and B. That was the first phase of the renovation.
What was the cost to do this with the video and so on, roughly?
Cost was 400. I just wrote it down. I think it was almost 500,000 between the two.
Yeah, we'd already bought the video ad, right? Wasn't this already set up upstairs? It wasn't.
No, it was not. We used a couple of the cameras. Oh, there it is. 528,000. 528,000 was the total. We're required by the state to provide court facilities, so it was on us to do the whole renovation. But we were able to get 88,000 from the state for different components that ended up in A and B.
And so that's more
As
or
well
less
as the
permanent
seismic,
now.
we did a seismic assessment of the courthouse as well. Excuse me?
It's permanent. And this is where it's going to be for the foreseeable future.
What is going to be?
We are.
The commissioners.
Maybe.
No, that's the next part of the presentation. that's
To be determined.
the 3-phase
Maybe.
process. So,
Yeah,
or the 3-phase project. So phase 1 was doing the meeting room switch. Phase 2 is to build an annex, which is either going to be at the east lawn of the museum or on the south courthouse lawn. I have an RFP drafted and ready to submit, just waiting for final approval from the commissioners. It's an expensive project. We do have 1.8 sitting in this budget primarily from the Timberland proceeds from when we were going to build the annex out at the jail. We also have almost $1 million sitting in ARPA, and we have $1 million request going through the state legislature right now to provide court facility replacement dollars. It's an anomaly, but it's something that I think we might be successful in, that they're considering through the AOC
You think
OGD.
that'll happen?
Yes.
I think so.
Well,
We'll see.
well,
Yeah.
nothing is certain, but we're at the very top of the list. You made a great case to them. I think it will be funded. It's just a matter of if we're going. So we've already been funded once, and we turned it down. That did not sit well with OJD. We asked again, and so again we're thinking, I don't know. Do we turn it down again? I don't know, but if we don't, what do? It's one of the reasons that I asked, what's her name at the museum?
Peyton.
Peyton. With the big collection and all. One of the ideas for an annex was that there's, you want me to get into this?
It's up to you guys. It's your president.
You've got two possibilities for an annex. One is on the south lawn, okay, connected to the courthouse. The other is on the museum property where the steam donkey used to sit. We can close off the street here and make more parking there. One of the reasons, to me anyway, and I don't know what the other commissioners think about this, one of the things to me is it makes more sense to build it on the museum property. Because there we could build a 2-story building, and our Board of Commissioners meeting rooms, et cetera, would be downstairs. Upstairs could be storage for all climate control storage for the museum. And we could possibly even use TLT dollars to help fund that building. Makes a lot of sense. If indeed the museum is going to stay where it is, they need storage, utilize some TLT funding to help build that building, that allows additional space in the courthouse to bring maybe some departments back to the courthouse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Yeah.
And long-term, this commissioner meeting room, while it works really well for our weekly meetings, we are challenged when we have any kind of large public hearing.
Sure.
We are going out using the boardroom, so it just adds to the challenge when it's time for us to schedule a public hearing, or just even large community meetings, to not have a space as large as what we had upstairs. That said, as we look at, shrinking timber revenues and how we want to use our money, the question is, does building an annex make the most sense? So there's a lot of question on the table, I think, for all of us to kind of poke through as we determine what the best long-term decision is. There definitely are some benefits to maximizing the courthouse. And if we can partner with the museum, also some philanthropy and other dollars that may come into assisting in building that. So it sits here today as a possibility.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm going to move on to the radio project, Fund 311, if there are no other questions. And so the spending authority in 310 is only for engineering work. So we wouldn't actually be building it next year. So that's why you don't see the full cost built in there. So we've talked about the radio replacement project, and I know John Spence will be talking about it in the context of his work when he presents under the communications this afternoon. This is the dedicated fund we've created because we anticipated getting funding through the congressionally directed spending program through the federal government, which we did. We were awarded $2 million for the project, and so I'm actually finalizing the paperwork on that now, hoping to receive the money in the next couple of months. So you see the $2 million spending authority. We will have 2 years to spend it. Given the pace this is moving, it's probably just going to go towards some equipment purchases. Where the large replacement project is at is we've landed on, so we know what we want to build. It's going to be over $20 million just for the construction build out, but we're also building in a funding strategy for the long-term future replacement and the day-to-day maintenance of this entity as it's managing the radio infrastructure. We are working with 911 on what that looks like. We will either move the system under 911 as it stands today or go through a process of an election to reform the 911 district. We've had several conversations with them. Their council is reviewing these alternatives just to make sure it works for them, and we're expecting some final commentary any day, and then we would be coming back to the commissioners with the official recommendation, by which hopefully you would approve that, and then we would get agreements in place with 911 and how this is going to unfold. But it's moving very slow, but it is moving. And so this $2 million would sit here. I wouldn't expect any of this to be spent next year on radios, maybe. We also do have $30,000 sitting in the ARPA fund, which can pay for some consulting time, as well as we have a domain purchase for the website, because there'll be a large outreach effort when we get the political action committee rolling on this. But don't really have any good timelines other than, yay, we got $2 million, and I can spend it whatever I want. But, so that's that fund. And then also good news, Fund 312, the same process that yielded the $2 million for radio, yielded $3 million for broadband. This is building and spending authority for those monies, which I expect to go right out the door to Tillamook Lightwave to spend. I submitted another request this round for community congressionally directed spending. Another around $3 million to the federal government. The first $3 million that we are receiving is going to start building middle mile fiber from the junction of Highway 22 and Highway 101 in Hebo, and then moving out towards Three Rivers, the Three Rivers development area. It'll stop there, and then the additional $3 million that we put in for this next fiscal year would continue that build further out Highway 22.
The first one has like 263 potential hookups or something like
Yeah,
that.
I think the whole strategy is 332. It also goes up Mount Hebo Road, connects to Cedar Creek Hatchery, Peewee Substation. And those sections of build are coming at the recommendation of the Lightwave contractor, Noanet, who is serving as their director essentially and consulting team, as well as Astound, the provider for the fiber network. Those are all my budgets until we get to facilities, which is next weekend.
Thank you.
Oh,
Hey, I'd
go.
just like to.
Click the clicker.
I'd just like to point out that you have just in the last few minutes described about $6 million worth of grants that you personally secured for the county in the last few months. So bravo, well done. Yeah, well done. And that's such a powerful case for getting a grant writer, because there's all this infrastructure money available, and and you can't reasonably spend all of your time on grant writing. So I think we could make very good use of a contract grant writer. So thank you for your excellent work.
Okay, one more before our lunch break here. We're down to facilities, and I see Mr. Jolly is online, so.
Ready to go.
Let's go ahead and do that one, and then we'll take our lunch break. So,
Okay, well,
go ahead.
thank you all. My part of the whole process here is pretty straightforward. Not a lot of changes over what we proposed last year. I'll just briefly go down several of the items that have changed, whether it's a little more, a little less. Most of our changes we've seen are like in our utilities, fuel, the garbage services, those just the price of doing business. The prices keep on going up, and especially the diesel fuel. That I have that tanks fueled up every week, and I see the invoices every week, and thankfully we're getting to be the warm time of the year where we're not going to have to do that anymore. But every winter time it seems to last a little bit longer. The cold spells, but we're seeing some decreases. However, like over the past several years, I've been trying to modernize all the tools that I have at my disposal chop saws, simple things like that. And that proposal I have for this year is $1,300 less than last year. Not a lot, but, there's still some other items I'd like to, purchase to make our lives and facilities part here a little easier. There's just a couple of us, so anything that we can do, modernize equipment-wise, labor-saving-wise, we're all for it. One area that went up slightly is our contracted services. Those are like the service from NCC for the boilers, the HVAC system, the elevator contract, even down to the chemicals that we put in our boilers to keep those running smoothly. They've all ticked up slightly, fuel surcharges, different things like that, you add all the different contracts that we have up with different vendors. They, add up to a little bit more than we were asking for last year.
I would add there is a $15,000 contingency.
Just increased a little bit, $500, that was proposing for this year. Heating fuel, I kind of talked about that briefly, but proposing just based on, the price of fuel keep on going up, it's gonna ask them for another $2,000 this upcoming year. And one area that we went down, considerable amount is the repair and maintenance of the buildings and grounds. Last year we asked for $96,000, this year it's $84,000. Just for the simple fact is that, we didn't wind up looking like we were gonna spend everything that we had last year, so we went ahead and dropped that down based on all the information we had available to us. And so we're asking, instead of even 96 last year, it's 84,000. And lastly, is the repair and maintenance of the vehicles that went up $3,500 over last year. That's to cover the cost of a lift gate for the work truck. I'm not getting any younger, neither is Josh. Lifting things up in the back of that truck sometimes really is difficult. So we have bid out a lift gate that I made a deal with the road department that they're gonna install it for us. So that's the price, lift gate plus a little bit for their labor. And it's something, like I said, that, we're looking forward to getting, because sometimes we have to do some heavy lifting and it's not so easy for us, even with two of us. So I have to, call around to different departments and outside of the courthouse to ask for help sometimes. So with this, we won't necessarily have to do that. So, but other than that, that's really all we're looking at here for facilities. It's over last year, it was $209,620. This year, it's $207.50. Not a huge decrease, but a lot of these items are just the price of doing business in an old building, sort of thing. So that's really all I have, unless y'all have questions. Happy to answer.
And I'm gonna go into the building improvement fund as well. If you,
What about fuel contracts? Do you have, or does the county have a contract with one of the fuel suppliers for, and does it follow an index, or how does that work?
Yeah, we have a contract with Carson Oil and Sheldon Oil, I do believe. Right now, I utilize Carson Oil to just, facilitate the courthouse. And the prices are comparable. I don't know the nitty gritty of, everything is not right at my disposal. But I do know that they're fairly comparable to each other.
But is there an index you follow, like a lot of fuel contracts are tied to the reporting of the Lund paper or something like that, and I'm just wondering if they do that, or if you just take increases and decreases as they come along. My experience is the increases come through the same afternoon they do them, decreases not so much. And if you follow an index, I don't know, because I'm asking, how does the county do that? Maybe that's a Rachel question for your contracts.
yeah, it's just in the contract what the rates are. And then we get billed
But,
whatever the going.
yeah, again, that might be a Rachel question. I don't know the nitty gritty of, all that, but, not to throw it over on Rachel, but I don't really have an answer to that.
I just answered it, but you couldn't hear it, Kevin.
Sorry, Rachel.
That's okay. Yeah, it's built into the contract, what the going rates are.
Okay, keep going. We've got one more section to this one, facilities.
Yeah, I'm gonna go over Fund 301, Kevin.
So I think my part of the process here is complete, so
Can I
I'm
ask
going to sign out unless anybody has any questions for me.
Kevin, this is Sean. I have a question for you, just because I picked
Yeah.
on Rachel earlier, so I'll pick on you. You've got 15,000 in contingency in the, what was it, contract services or whatever. But and this goes back to having budgets. The R&M building and grounds, you budgeted 96,000 last year. You've got 54,000 remaining as of the end of March. Are you going to spend 50,000 before the end of June?
Probably not unless, this is what the discussion was all about, unless the oh my God moment happened. But no, I foresee that we won't. But, I always, look at it as a 90-year-old building and it's, disaster's one phone call away. But I don't foresee that we're going to be spending all that, so, right, I don't think that we will. And so our contingency could go down a little.
And it has. I reduced that.
Yep.
That's already down to the, so
The
I
84.
reduced the contingency quite a bit in the budget that you've seen. There still is a contingency of 15.
Yeah, yeah, but I think it's
So it's
just,
up to you what you wanna,
yeah, it's our consideration of what do we think we're putting in the thing called contingency that Sean does versus what people are putting in their own budget for contingency, and how do we just make sure we haven't double done it?
And it's not called a contingency of the funds.
Right.
Department, so.
Right.
But then I just need to tell you that you and Josh as a team keep this building purring, and I don't know how you do it, I really don't. Just thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, and, I couldn't do it without him, and Lisa too. She does do a good job and tried our best, and it's always nice to hear that, and I appreciate the compliment. I'll pass it along to him.
Great.
So Kevin, when you were talking about diesel, I was thinking about how grateful I was for you and your work this winter when we had the power outage and the courthouse was operating on diesel. I was just so relieved that you stay on top of that and that things worked almost seamlessly. So bravo, well done.
It's all, thank you, that's nice to hear. It all boils down to keeping up on the maintenance, have a schedule. They come out every year, we just follow a schedule, and whenever they find a discrepancy, I try not to hesitate to get it, corrected. Because, you kind of put things off and it kind of tends to go, and when you need something like, something as vital as a generator or whatever else may be, you may not have it if you don't keep up on it, so thank you.
You're welcome. And also, I'm glad you're getting a lift for the truck, because not
So am
only
I.
do we care about, we do, of course, care about your safety and Josh's, but also, it's very expensive when staff get hurt. So it's a good investment to, help people not get hurt. So thank you for thinking
Right.
of that and following through.
Well, thanks. Any other questions?
I think we're good with your part. Rachel may have one more section of yours, and then we'll be done.
yep, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
So Fund 301 is one you're really gonna wanna look at from a contingency standpoint. It's pretty much served as the building contingency fund. And there is always something that comes up every year. We have a couple of projects that we have tagged, continuing to try to get a contractor on board to do some remodeling in the DA's office, some other smaller security improvements. We're trying not to sink a lot of money into upgrades because that's the phase 3 of the 3-phase project that we talked about. Once the annex is built, we'll be coming back to this building doing extensive, hopefully seismic upgrades, HVAC installations, HVAC repairs, ADA, Sallyport, the list goes on and on. potentially a bunch of cosmetic updates, maybe shuffling people around, I'm not sure, but lots of work there to do. So I'm hoping we're not doing any large projects other than what needs to happen in the DA's office because their working conditions are horrendous. So in contracted services and capital outlay, you'll see some budget for implementing outcomes out of the facilities assessment. We're working with McKinstry right now to undergo facilities assessments for all of the county's facilities across all of the departments, and there'll be a lot of recommendations out of there. I have a placeholder of $500,000 to implement some that may be more urgent because phase 3 is many years away. So because we don't know what those are, and the assessment is going to take a while, and we have the other contingency fund that we're talking about, we could pull money out of here. We could reduce that budget, but that's I guess more discussion we need to have. So, but there is $500,000 in here of purely unknown projects yet to be determined that we usually spend on
What's
something.
your security window in the treasurer's office?
That will be removing one of the doors to one of the offices and putting in a window like, what's it, circuit court or justice court? So that people can't just walk in.
Plexiglass or bulletproof glass or something, all that. Yeah.
That's
Okay, any questions on that one?
No, I appreciate you calling that out, Rachel, because I think that's probably a really good example of where Sean has money set aside and we have money set aside that, you know, we just have never thought of it that way, so that's fabulous.
So you have money in your budget for your window?
No.
Oh.
That was a good idea.
Well, I didn't know what she was referring to.
There's a contingency pool.
Oh,
I'm talking
yeah.
about the things that we just don't know what might happen, that Sean puts every year into our budget, so. All right.
Okay, so as soon as Rachel disconnects us, we're going to go off the record and take a lunch break, and we'll reconvene then about 1:30, starting with the surveyor. So until then, we will stand in recess till 1:30.